I'm going to do this video, and it's regarding lying politicians, and in particular Republican politicians. In this particular video, you're going to see the governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, and when he got elected, he had made a campaign promise not to touch or make any changes in the abortion laws in the state of North Carolina. Well, he promptly broke that one and has issued a lot of restrictive abortion laws in the state of North Carolina. In this particular case, he's going to turn around and try to duck and dodge on the issue of the legislation that he signed off. And Chuck Todd is going to press him regarding that legislation, and the legislation has to do with LGBT rights.
North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory has found himself on the front lines of the latest battle for LGBT rights. Here's what happened. The state's largest city, Charlotte, passed an ordinance that prevented businesses from discriminating against lesbians, gays, and transgender people. In response, Governor McCrory quickly signed into law a bill that's being called by some anti-gay, the so-called bathroom law. The law does a few things. First, it invalidates the Charlotte ordinance and prevents other municipalities in the state from passing similar protections. Second, it requires that transgender people use the bathroom and locker room matching their birth certificate gender rather than the gender they identify with. Governor McCrory has been forced to defend and clarify the law's intent, which goes much further than just repealing the Charlotte ordinance, all while he faces a tough re-election fight this November. And the governor of North Carolina joins me now. Governor McCrory, welcome to the press.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Since you signed the executive order, and it was intended to try, I think you were trying to ratchet back some of the controversy here, you still had more companies joining the boycott here. Bloomberg, Capital One, United Airlines, Williams-Sonoma. That's just on Friday. 160 companies have called for its repeal. You still have an NBA commissioner that is not yet committing to keeping the All-Star game in Charlotte. Any estimates that we have of lost revenue so far, we have come up with calculated, conservative calculations, 39.7 million, 186 million perhaps in revenue, and some have suggested billions in lost revenue. All of this now, do you have regrets signing this law?
I'm going to, as governor, as I did with mayor, I will always call out government overreach. In this example, the city of Charlotte, where I was mayor for 14 years, did government overreach. And what your pre-clip didn't mention was it was the left that brought about the bathroom bill, not the right, in the city of Charlotte, like the city of Houston tried to do and was rejected by 61% of the vote. The city of Charlotte passed a bathroom ordinance mandate on every private sector employer in Charlotte, North Carolina, one of the largest, 15th, 16th largest cities in the United States of America. And I think that's government overreach. It's not government's business to tell the private sector what their bathroom, locker room, or shower practices should be. Not only the private business, but also the YMCA and other nonprofit organizations. And by the way, this is what 29 other states also do not have, these types of restroom, locker room, and bathroom policies. So
I thought, you talked about overreach. Okay, you say Charlotte overreach.
Right.
How did the state of North Carolina, the state government, not overreach in just the same way? You mentioned Houston. Voters made that decision.
Right.
You can make a case. Voters made the decision in Charlotte. Charlotte rejected it, then elected 2 new members of the city council. This has been a long debate in the city of Charlotte. This is where they came down. You guys debated for like 10 seconds. I mean, don't you regret the time of debate?
Actually, Charlotte's vote was a very little debate. They just had a lot of public speakers speaking for and against.
No, that night. But this has been months. This has been months of a debate.
Real quick, Charlotte had originally turned it down, just like Houston has, and there hasn't been outrage. There wasn't outrage toward Charlotte when they turned it down initially. There was an outrage toward Houston, Texas when they turned it down recently. But I tell you what I've learned through this is we've got to have more dialogue and not threats. I was in Hamlet, North Carolina, a small town that could be in any town in the United States of America. I walked into a buffet restaurant, African-American buffet restaurant, and the people just welcomed me with open arms and said, thanks for protecting us.
I don't believe that more than a man in the moon. And as far as more dialogue, where was all the dialogue they had? They called a special session of their House of Representatives legislature, I'm sorry, which cost them $40,000 that they didn't have to spend. They didn't even announce what the subject matter was for the special session until everybody got there. And then they rammed that law through in the middle of the night, and he sat in his office waiting for all the necessary signatures to go on that law in the legislature, and he rushed to sign that law. So where is all the conversation and discussion as far as that law was concerned? Now, again, I'm not coming down on either side of that law. You know, that's the business of the people of North Carolina. But it seems to me that the people of in Charlotte decided what they wanted to do, and then the state government overreached. And not only did they invalidate the Charlotte law, but they created a law that would prevent them from reenacting the law, even by a vote of the people. So he's full of crap.
Got back in my car and I got a call from someone in corporate America going, man, you got to change this. We're getting killed. Mm-hmm. And it showed me the disconnect we have between the corporate suites and Main Street on a very complex subject and a very personal subject regarding government policy of all things, which didn't exist before this group.
It's a very thoughtful thing for you to say about dialogue. Where was the dialogue?
Well,
I mean, first of all, you didn't want a special session. Your legislature.
I didn't want a special session, but the legislature, to their defense, we had an April 1st deadline in which the Charlotte law was coming into effect. And they had to pass the law prior.
You had said you weren't worried about that deadline.
I wasn't. The legislature, according to their lawyers, were, because they were afraid once it became into effect, it would be harder to overturn. And we can have the debate a longer time. But again, I don't think government should be telling the private sector what their restroom and shower law should be to allow a man into a woman's restroom or a shower facility at a YMCA, for example. However, in government, and I'm not going to tell the private sector, any manufacturing plant, any bank can have their own policies. NBC can have their own policy in Charlotte, North Carolina, or anywhere in North Carolina. But I do believe in our high schools, in our middle schools, in our universities, we should continue to have the tradition that we've been having in this country for years. And we have a women's facility and a men's facility. You know, it's worked out pretty well, and I don't think we need any further government interference.
But this, as we talked about, this law went further than that. It wiped away the city of Charlotte's ability to govern, to do some things on their own. For instance, they can't even have their own minimum wage now. Why'd you do that? Why'd you sign that? You're a former mayor of Charlotte. Could you accept all these limitations that big state government has put on city and local control?
I made a point.
See, and that's just another example of Republicans talking about they want less government, but in reality, they want more government. They want complete control. And for them to even limit Charlotte's ability to increase their minimum wage in the city of Charlotte, you know, that's just ridiculous.
When I was mayor of Charlotte for 14 years, we dealt with fire and police and airports and roads and light rail lines. We didn't impose new regulations on businesses. And I don't think the government ought to be the HR director for every business, whether it be in Charlotte or whether it be in Greensboro or whether it be in Boone, North Carolina. And this is that fine line between how much does government tell the private sector in a regulatory way what to do. And in this case, a city which I still proudly call home, I think overstepped. And you know, I've called out my own Republican legislature in the past with magistrates, and I said, no, the magistrates need to marry after the Supreme Court case, what the Supreme Court said.
But you didn't, you know, in your executive order, you didn't, and you're not calling for a passage of protecting gay North Carolinians from discrimination if they're fired in the private sector. Why?
Because I'm not the private sector's HR director. I am the HR director and the governor of all state employees, and I sign an executive order which protects all state employees.
Yeah, but you're also the governor for the citizens of North Carolina. So you can pull that, I'm not the HR director for all private employees all you want. You still need to stand up for the individual rights of the citizens of North Carolina, and you seem to be missing that point.
In the 9th largest state in the United States of America, the same executive order that the Louisiana governor just signed and got praised for it. I just happen to be a Republican governor, and I got criticized for doing the same thing. So I have to say there are a little bit of politics.
But with all due respect, sure. Barry Goldwater had said this when they were debating whether to have the Civil Rights Act and debating whether government should be involved in dealing with racial discrimination. And he said, I am unalterably opposed to discrimination of any sort, but not law that embodies features like these provisions which fly in the face of the Constitution and which require for their effective execution the creation of a police state. The same argument was used to try to defeat laws that are now considered untouchable, right? Laws that protect minorities from discrimination in the private sector. Why don't gays and lesbians qualify?
First of all, I don't know of any business right now in North Carolina, and very similar to what Nikki Haley said about South Carolina, that is doing this. But at the same time, what we've got to do is deal with this extremely new social norm that has come to our nation in a very quick period of time and have these discussions about the complexity of equality while also balancing the concept of privacy, including even privacy in the most private of areas of our life, which is a restroom, locker room, or shower facility in our high schools.
But gender identity is the same privacy. It's the same issue.
Well,
you know, there are folks that they're looking for that same privacy. I mean, do you want somebody who identifies as a woman, born on their birth certificate as a man, may look like a woman, going into a men's bathroom?
All I can say is we have 27 states.
Is that fair to that?
Yeah, see, he didn't have an answer for that one.
We have 27 states. This is not just a North Carolina debate. This is a national debate that's just come on in literally the last 3 months. No one had heard of this debate until the Houston Ordinance was defeated by the people of Houston. We have 27 of 29 states that also don't have this type of mandate on private business, including the state of New York.
I'm curious about due diligence.
Sure.
Did you meet with any transgender people before you signed that law?
But I've met with transgender people.
So obviously he didn't meet with any transgender people before he signed the law. So now he's going to spin that he's met with them in the past. But he didn't talk to them about this particular issue.
In the past, and I've met with them since and have had very positive conversations. Now, the conversation with a very powerful group called the Human Rights Council, my gosh, they're more powerful than the NRA. And
does anybody believe that that organization is more powerful than the NRA? That is such a load of bullshit. I want to really laugh at the out-and-out lie this guy is telling right now.
And millions of dollars, which makes me want to overturn United because I don't know who their donors are either. But they are putting on a lot of pressure instead of having good dialogue. And I had wonderful dialogue with a transgender woman who is, and we talked about each other's issues. There's passion on each side of this issue.
Does it bother you at all, though? Georgia defeated it. South Carolina said didn't. Does it bother you at all that basically North Carolina and Mississippi is the only other state?
Well, let me correct you. Georgia and Mississippi was a religious freedom bill. This was not a religious freedom bill. In fact, we have not had any religious freedom bill introduced in the state of North Carolina. One reason is because I'm governor. So the confusion by the national media and the New York Times of Indiana religious freedom bill, Mississippi and Georgia religious freedom bill, that's not the case. This was basically a restroom privacy issue versus equality. And these things need to be discussed, not threatened by Hollywood or anyone. You know, Hollywood, with all due respects to the new Batman and Robin movie is...
The new Batman and Robin movie, this guy doesn't even go to the movies. It's Batman versus Superman. That just tells you how out of touch this guy is, because that movie was the #1 movie in the country for like 2 weeks. So apparently he doesn't go to the movies, and he wasn't a comic book fan.
In China, which has anti-gay, terrible human rights violations. This is not like an issue of bathroom privacy or restroom privacy in North Carolina. And let's have this dialogue, and I welcome that dialogue.
Governor McCrory, is there any way this gets repealed?
I don't think the restroom. I do believe there is one part of the bill that I did disagree with when I signed it, and that is not able to sue within state courts, and that needs to be repealed. It was very poorly thought out.
All right, we'll be watching for more. Governor McCrory.
Willing to bet you, okay, that law gets repealed, because money talks and bullshit walks, and you have all of these major corporations that are telling North Carolina that they are going to basically pull out of North Carolina, which is going to send North Carolina into a recession. And one thing about it, politicians respond to the voters, and when the voters start screaming blue murder across the board and talking about having recall elections and holding them accountable during the next election, all the guys that are up, you watch how fast they repeal this thing.